very good evening to you and welcome to this Wednesday's edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvogo. Housing has been the cornerstone of South Africa's post-apartheid efforts to build a new, democratic, prosperous country free of discrimination, segregation, and other ills that had plagued this country for centuries. Little wonder then that as politicians begin to crisscross the nation, asking for people's votes, the issue of housing is featuring prominently in the list of citizens' demands. To take stock of the government's successes and failures in the delivery of houses for the poor, I'm joined this evening by Human Settlements Minister Mamloko Kubai. After that conversation, our panel for this evening consists of an academic who has written extensively on the subject, also by the chairperson of the Housing Committee of the South African Local Government Association, as well by a representative of civil society organization Abahlali Basemjondolo. They look specifically at local government's role in delivering houses for the poor. The Watchdog starts now.
Madam Speaker, we have laid the foundation for a better life. This is what the reconstruction and development program is about. The RDP is alive and well.
We will also address the trend in some provinces where there has been a slowdown in housing delivery, as well as addressing the broader question of spatial settlement.
Human settlement is not just about building houses. It is about transforming our cities and towns and building cohesive, sustainable and caring communities.
While we have made great progress in providing housing, many South Africans still do not have land to build homes and to earn livelihoods.
Well, all of South Africa's democratic era presidents making the same promise over and over again. Let's look briefly at whether they in fact lived up to those promises. The 1994 Housing White Paper, RDP, provided a framework for housing development target of building 1 million state-funded houses within the first 5 years, a target of 338,000 units per year. Now, according to Department of Human Settlements numbers, close to 3.3 million houses or units were built from the 1994-1995 financial year to December 2018. That number, of course, excludes serviced sites, plots of land supplied with water, electricity, and sanitation that have been delivered since 1994. If we continue with those numbers, in 2019, the Human Settlements Department promised to deliver 470,000 housing units, 300,000 service sites, 30,000 social housing units, and upgrade 1,500 informal settlements. It only managed to develop 126 informal settlement upgrading plans instead. And in the first quarter of last year, 2020-21, the Human Settlements Department managed to deliver close to 15,000 housing opportunities, I should underline, they said, which cost the department 3.3 billion rand. Just from those numbers, I know it's a lot, Minister, we're going to keep on putting up these graphics every once in a while for the sake of our viewers so they can see for themselves the numbers. But you probably know the numbers by now. Is it a good story to tell?
Good evening, Vuyo. Good evening to SABC viewers. It's a balanced issue. One, I would say we had planned to do more. We've not been able to do more as we planned, but also the background to understand. And one is not being defensive, Vuyo, and I'll go to some of the challenges and the weaknesses in the areas that we should pay attention to, or we should have paid attention to, and that we are currently doing that. So you do have a balance where you find that we've been able to create new settlements, we've been able to create new opportunities for housing, we've been able to even do a mix. You'll understand that initially, when we started with building the houses as the department, as government, it should have been what people started criticizing around the matchboxes, the sizes, the quality of the houses, and that has improved drastically. Secondly, in terms of even the mixed housing settlement, you find that initially we would build houses away from where people are. We would build houses where we do not build, for example, put infrastructure. We have changed that and started building that, putting infrastructure, bulk infrastructure into the areas, making sure that we do not continue to segregate between those who have and those who do not have. But we do have some of the challenges that we see where you are able to say, we started projects were not finished, and therefore there are people who are victims. And I always say to the team when I talk to them, if there's a house that was supposed to be built and given to a person, there is a victim for that. So it's not an incident that does not have a victim, because if it's a senior citizen who was supposed to receive a house and did not receive it, if it was a single parent who was supposed to receive a house and did not receive it, we are not fulfilling our obligation in terms of the Constitution. So it's a mixed, balanced approach that we can say, Vuyo, but also acknowledging that this has been a moving target. So you would have set with a particular number at some point, but the number continues to increase.
Now, see, here's where it's interesting, and I know, like in our invitation to you, we said we'd narrow things down in the interest of time and ask you to focus more on the past decade. But here's something that's very relevant here, and hopefully, I mean, the department would have taken you through what actually happened, because, I mean, without that context and history, I would imagine you wouldn't be able to move both with the speed, but also to deal with the issues we are going to talk about, which you say you are putting in place to try and deal with these problems. But in that bite, where we put together all the presidents, current and former, former President Thabo Mbeki makes the point that there has been a slowdown, right? This is before the 10 years that you and I are supposed to talk about this evening. And you can see from the graphs, you know, especially from, I mean, 97 to 99, where the graph kept going up from, I mean, since 1995. And then you start seeing the decline 2000, 2001, 2003, and so on, which then should have, you know, sent all the red flags, you know, but seemingly it didn't. Have you been taken through by your team, you know, like this history, so that you are able to understand the nature of the problem, but also the gravity of the problem, and from there, presumably, only then would you then be able to tell whether or not you can actually address the problem, so that you don't end up making the same promises that those who came before you continued to make.
Look, we continue to do the analysis of what we are, obviously looking back, as you say, from 1994, and that's why you'd see quite an different introduction of different programs that responds to the particular analysis. Firstly, as we started building, as I said, you would have realized that some of the people, as we were building them RDP houses, after some time we realized that they demolished them and then they built the big houses, because what they were looking for is service sites. And then the analysis was done to say, okay, you do have different categories of people, that people who are just looking for service sites, and that was introduced. Then later, as well as we go, we find that we have a lot of people in urban areas where most of them will give RDP houses, and then some of them will end up selling. And then you start analyzing. That's why you have programs such as rental, low-cost rentals being introduced, low-cost housing being introduced. So it's an over period of time where you analyze. And part of the issue here is that when you analyze these periods, you'd see that it's not a generic trend. So you'd find that when you go to urban areas, for example, if you are in Gauteng, you'd see a different picture. When you go to KZN, you see a different picture. So that's what is important to analyze. Yes, you have a national picture of where the trends are and what is happening, influenced a lot by urban migration, as we look at the statistics as well, to understand what is happening. There would be periods where you would have seen high number of middle income, what we call middle class, increasing. And that would have necessitated, that's why the introduction of this low-cost rentals, this low-cost housing that we're assisting. Now we are starting to see a regression because of COVID again. Quite a number of people losing their jobs. Then they are starting to lose their properties because they're being repossessed and all those things. Now, what does that mean? It always is going to translate into more people needing RDPs, needing service sites, just to have some point of view. So it's not a generic point where you can say, this is exactly what happened. So if we go by particular periods, and from the department point of view and from government point of view, there's been various interventions at various times, including some of the things where you look at our grants. For example, initially we would have done grants that talked to housing, what you call HSDG grants. Now you'd see that later then, because we recognize that you've got to be able to pull bulk and urban renewal. And then we responded to that by introducing a grant that speaks to urban areas, for example, your metros, that supports them because of the growth of informal settlements. And that came in just to support us so that we assist the municipalities as they formalize this form informal settlements so that people can live decently. And that's part of what we had to do. Again, we looked at mining towns, and you find that within the mining towns, you have people who are living there. Some of them, the mining towns are dilapidating. So there was a grant specifically done to address those. So as I'm saying, as we look at the challenges at different times, there's a particular intervention that is being made to respond to that challenge. And for human settlement, as I'm saying, it's a moving target because with the changes of economic landscape, it changes what you have to respond to.
You know, it's interesting you say that, you talk about this a moving target, because only yesterday I had an economist here who was talking about the importance of acknowledging, you know, our history and our past and what it did. She spoke in her column, you know, about places, towns and cities across the country that were sending people to Johannesburg, to Cape Town, to your Port Elizabeth, to your Durban and so on, you know, to seek employment, and how that actually hasn't changed, which meant that those areas, you know, are still, you know, where they were, if not worse off than they were, decades ago. And I am raising this on the back of your moving target, precisely because if you had as ambitious a program as this housing program of the RDP was, then monitoring and regular, you know, assessment ought to have been part of that. Otherwise, you don't know, you know, what you are chasing and what could be undoing whatever you would have done. In other words, you know, one step forward and two steps back. So it cannot then continue to be, you know, the excuse for not doing, you know, what you promised to do.
I agree with you, Vuyo, to the issue around, when you reflect on the issue around monitoring and evaluation, but also what I would want to add is around planning. Part of the challenge is that we've planned cross-purpose as different spheres of government. One is that you'd find that in a metro or a municipality, they would have a particular plan where you have IDPs and all that, and then the province will have their plans. We would have our plans as national. And part of the weakness in that is that even just on the planning and not synchronizing our plan, it means we spending resources quite differently instead of focusing on areas, and therefore you can do proper monitoring and evaluation. And this is informed by one, where you find that all of us want to show that I've got authority in this level, and therefore I have mandate constitutionally to be able to do that. That's the first problem that we have identified. Now, part of the issue where we are happy and we are wanting to utilize more effectively the district development model, because the district development model speaks to one plan, one district. And we are saying out of that, we want to ensure that even within human settlements, and this is the conversation I'm having with the MECs, and as I do the visits to provinces, next week will be in Free State and in Northern Cape. So what we want to do is to say, as we plan in the districts, there must be one plan of human settlement, not many. You must be able to agree that this is what we are prioritizing, a human settlement with bulk infrastructure, with housing, and we are able to respond to the needs. So that's the first thing. Secondly, around monitoring and evaluation, one of the weaknesses that we are acknowledging as national department is that we need to have a system, especially in the age of technology today, where we can be able to say, out of the whole country, if I'm saying I'm a council and I have residents in my ward who have applied for an RDP, therefore, I should be able to go somewhere either on internet, because they can help us with those, because in every community there's a ward council who has access to internet, for example, that can be able to check that on a central database that says this is what. We believe that will reduce the issue of corruption, where people give the people that are not supposed to benefit houses. But secondly, we'll be able to assist us to monitor in terms of the process. Currently, what we have is that each province has a database, and we have to go to the provinces to verify the numbers. They report to us, and we think it's not working in terms of going forward. Secondly, we do have a database of how many informal settlements are in the country per province, per municipality. We do think that we should be able to say into the municipalities. One thing that we have recognized as part of the challenge while we're talking about monitoring and evaluation is the fact that we have so regulated environment. One, the cost of doing business for the small businesses in the sector is too high as a contractor. So contribution to economy is a bit of a challenge. So we have to resolve that. But secondly, the time it takes to formalize an informal settlement, it currently takes 10 years. It's unacceptable. But that's one of the things I said to the team. We need to change that. And we are running out of time to change that right now.
Two things, Minister, before we run out of time for this interview. Why are we upgrading informal settlements? You know, because we said we wanted to eradicate them, you know, because, you know, they are not giving people the dignity that they deserve. But why do we keep doing that? Is it because we've been defeated? In other words, you can no longer give them what we promised them right at the beginning.
As I said, Vuyo, when you look at the needs of South Africans, you can't do a one-size-fits-all. Part of why we are talking about formalization of informal settlement is to be able to, for example, give people stands. You find that in an area, let's say, an informal settlement, I'll take where I was over the weekend in Secunda. It was previously an informal settlement, what is called Mandela Village. When you go there, you find that these people are in stands and they have shacks. What we have gone to do as government is to say, you are in this area, we are going to formalize you, we are going to ensure that we put infrastructure, water, electricity, and sanitation, and we build an RDP where you are. That's what we are talking about, formalization of informal settlements. Now, secondly, you might find others where they are sitting where it's not appropriate. For example, they're sitting on a dolomitic area, they're sitting on water areas where they can go, there's a sinkhole possibility and all those things. When geotechs go there, they find that it's not a place for suitable for people to, or for building. And those are the ones that we move. But part of the issue that we've got to acknowledge is that not everybody is looking for an RDP. There are people who are saying, all we need is service stands, I will build for myself. I can't afford to buy a house, but I would want to build myself a decent house. That's why a formalization of an informal settlement responds to that particular person. So integrated response is important to be able to say, we have this different type of people that exist and with different type of needs. And therefore, that's why we need to respond to them differently and adequately to their needs so that we don't waste government money. As I said earlier on, sometimes we build RDP. I mean, you talk to a lot of people who tell you, we build an RDP which we're spending a lot of money on, only to find the person was not looking for an RDP. They were just looking for a site that is service. They will build for themselves. Now, we would have wasted money because the person demolishes it.
I'm glad you're also agreeing that this database system with the provinces and so on doesn't work. Because, I mean, for years now, municipalities have been complaining about the fact that some have to ask for accreditation, but it takes time, and there are other problems built into this whole thing. And this becomes important because if you're saying the district model is the way to go, considering the fact that metros themselves are districts, you know. So if you are able to correct, you know, the wrongs you've identified already, those ought to have been corrected in the current system using the metros as guinea pigs, so to speak, to see whether it is actually a system or a model that you can then replicate elsewhere, where things are even more complicated in rural areas that are where people are sparsely populated.
Yeah, just to give you an indication, the reason why we are saying the district model, prior to the district model introduction, in the metros, for example, we will give a grant, the USDG, in terms of the urban renewal grant, in terms of the municipalities. And then we'll give a grant to the provinces. But what we're finding and what I've been going through is to realize that what the municipalities will submit, for example, it comes directly to me as a minister or the department. It doesn't go through the province. So we will approve and work with the municipality, and you find that the province has different approach. That's why we are talking about the introduction of the district model going to resolve us, because what I said to the MECs and what I continue to talk to them is that what we will do is that when they do their business plans and the minister has to approve the business plans, we'll have a conversation. So when the metros submit their requests, their business plan for the USDG, we'll also have the MEC present so that we can synchronize and make sure that this is the one plan. So that has been a disjuncture that we have identified. Secondly, around the metros are developers. But in other provinces where there's been other municipalities which are not metros, which are developers, the provinces have been able to say, when you do not deliver, we'll take away the status. And that's what we want to see, because it's in the interest of delivery. The provinces and the MECs have powers to be able to say when a municipality does not perform, they have to take the responsibility and ensure that that province performs. And these are the conversations that we continue. But we think that we have now started to say, let's utilize the district model as one plan. All of us will go and channel the resources, and we can all communicate in one voice and say, this is our priority for the coming financial year. And not different priorities in different areas, but focused, be able to determine and say, we have little to money and we have to do more because the demands are high, and have to balance across in terms of the needs.
I'm going to have our viewers have the last word, Minister. Here's a question to you from Wanama Sedi. Please ask her when title deeds will be ready. Our parents are suffering in the hands of the family, and now they need to vote for what service to be rendered when they don't even have proof of property ownership. Minister?
Just quickly on that one. Okay, just quickly on that one. We continue to issue title deeds in provinces across. You would have seen, we went to, when I visited Gauteng together with MEC Maile, we issued title deeds. We are scheduled to issue title deeds in Limpopo in the coming few weeks. And every time provinces are issuing title deeds. So we are actually ramping up. Part of the problem, as I'm saying, we have identified is that for example, the pre-1994 stock in terms of title deeds. The challenge is the formalization of those, what do they call them? The declaration of the townships. You find all townships that are not declared because municipalities have put particular requirements. We are having conversations with the MECs, engaging the municipalities to loosen up the requirements so that we can be able to fast track the issuing of the title deeds. From human settlement point of view, in terms of issuing of title deeds, we are worried that we are not moving at the pace and speed that we want to. And that's why this conversation and my visits to provinces is part of unlocking some of these blockages that exist.
Now, a week ago, Minister, and this is when I first asked for this interview, our colleagues across the country went around communities asking them just how they felt, you know, about their housing problems, you know, on the eve of this election where all these politicians will descend in their areas and asking them for, you know, their votes. Just take a listen to what some of them I had to say.
I'm staying in the shack, and when it rains, my furniture is getting damaged, and I'm really going to struggle because I'm not working.
What the government should do is to appoint the contractors to complete the project, because those that will start afresh, they will delay the process.
If they can't provide electricity for us where we are, how are they going to build us houses in Konobia? I've lost hope. This whole thing has become suspicious to me. People are reluctant to vote. I'm one of them. Because voting is a pointless exercise because we don't get anything in return. None of the promises made to us have been met.
If you don't have a toilet, you must go to the neighbor sometimes and ask for the toilet. So that thing is too difficult for us.
I'm not going to ask you to respond as a minister, if you will, minister. But when people talk about lost hope, you know, feelings of neglect, lost dignity, how does it make you feel as a South African who enjoys better rights, you know, and privileges than them?
Yeah, I think it's very sad. That's why even when I visited Eastern Cape, for example, you'd have seen my message strongly around the unfinished projects, that we can't tolerate that anymore. I've started to have a conversation. We are changing. I've asked them to look at we've looked at the contracts that we are having. I have met with the Auditor General's team to assist me in terms of evaluation where they think, and they do believe that we do have clauses, and therefore I'm assembling a legal team to assist me in terms of the clauses, because part of the problem for you is that we've got a lot of projects that started. The money is gone and no one has been held accountable. So that's the first thing. To have to come back and get people to account for those unfinished projects, that's the first. Secondly is to say, and this is what I consistently remind myself and everybody else, is that when we do not deliver, when we make promises, when we say we're going to build houses and we don't go and build those houses, or we build them and they're not finished, this is not an incident without a victim. It could be a mother who has run away from her house because of abuse, ends up in the streets, had been promised a house and is not getting it. And I can tell you, it's not something that we should be able to pride ourselves as a department. Our mandate and what the president has asked us to do is to give dignity to our people. And that's what I will endeavor to do while I'm here as the minister, mostly making sure that we are accountable, we are transparent in how we do the work, but also we can be able to give back the dignity to the best of our ability. We'll ensure that we go across the country and ensure that we commit and make sure that we visit the sites. I mean, I've been there myself, I've seen the informal settlement, but I've lived in a shack, by the way, when I was young. I know what it means to be in a shack. It doesn't give, you can't study when you are a young person. It doesn't give privacy to family. When it rains, like this person who was saying, you stand in the street as family for the whole night. This is not what the new South Africa and the democratic South Africa is about. We have to ensure that we give back dignity. And I've said to the team, it can't continue that we are perceived as a department with this image. We have to work hard and earn the respect back from South Africans. And we can only do that when we recommit ourselves to working, ensuring that we meet our targets, we deliver the houses jointly, not only as national department, but with the provinces and with the municipalities. But we must remember every cent that we spend belongs to South Africans, and we have to account for it. And that's what I'm committing to South Africans, transparency and accountability.
Minister Mlowo, goodbye. Thanks very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Time now to take a quick ad break. When we return, we're joined by SALGA Chair for Housing, Xolani Sotashe, Thapelo Mohapi, who is the national spokesperson of Abahlali Basemjondolo, and academic Professor Hope Magidimisa Chipungu, who has written extensively on this issue of housing. Well, I'm now joined by people who have been working in this part of the job that needs to be done. SALGA's chairperson for housing, Xolani Sotashe, who himself is a councillor. Thapelo Mohapi is the national spokesperson of Abahlali Basemjondolo. Professor Hope Magidimisa Chipungu is an academic who has actually written extensively on the subject of housing for the poor. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Sotashe, on a point, one of the last points, that we spoke about with the minister. Just from your experience as the South African Local Government Association, what has been your experience? I mean, dealing with the housing department, having to deliver houses. What has been your experience as local government practitioners who, on the other hand, have to, hear the complaints from people who just want houses, who don't want to get involved in bureaucracy or in politics even?
No, thank you very much, Vuyo. Good evening to you and to your viewers, and also to other panelists. Vuyo, just to put it into context, I'm the chairperson of Human Settlement and Municipal Planning, the NEC member of SALGA. So I am responsible for the 9 provinces. They've got their own provincial chairpersons, which they are reporting to the national working group that I chair. Just to respond to your question, and I listened to the minister attentively, SALGA is the voice of local government, and we participate in different platforms, the IGR platforms, where we express the views of municipalities. Part of what we've been advocating for is the devolution of the functions to local government, because if you look at the local government in terms of the white paper of 1998, it assumed that local government would have its own revenues to, deliver the services to the communities. But if you look at the state of the municipalities as we speak now, the majority of the municipalities do not have a revenue base. And therefore, those assumptions that are enshrined in the white paper are not relevant today. It means that we have to review the white paper because it's not talking to the conditions of 2021. So part of what we've been really struggling, especially with the devolution of, of the built environment function, in particular the housing function, the minister is acknowledging that there is a mismatch in terms of planning. So what is enshrined in the legislation, such functions are supposed to be devolved to local government, whereby the municipalities can be able to really respond to the issue of human settlement as a whole, not just the delivery of houses, but to look at broadly at the issue of the human settlement. Because the issue of providing services to the units that are provided by national and provinces, municipalities are responsible to provide water and sanitation and electricity. Now, the minister is correct, and even if you look at the issue of the budget cycle, they are not the same. One of the struggles that the municipalities are having is that if you look at the budget cycles of the municipalities, municipalities adopt their budget at the end of May. and they run to the following year until the 30th of June. And the transfers that are coming from national government and national government, in most cases, they arrive late in different municipalities. And yet municipalities are expected to deliver to some of the business plans that they have been, that have been presented to national government. So those are some of the challenges that we really have. And
let me ask you to hold your thoughts right there, if you don't mind, Mr. Sotashe. I just want to go to Prof very quickly. Prof, you heard what the minister had to say, and you've just heard Mr. Sotashe talking about what they are encountering as councillors and as he put it, the voice of local government. Your thoughts as an outsider looking in?
Okay, thank you very much, Vuyo, and greetings to all your viewers this evening. My take around the issue of service delivery and, of course, and housing as a human settlement issue is that South Africa has spent a lot of time actually trying to figure it out how to do it right since 1994. And of course, you will hear academics and researchers will give you the statistics of how much houses have been delivered since 1994, which is about 3.4 million. You also indicated that in your discussion earlier on. But the question that are always put forward is to say, what is it that we're not getting right? Why is it that people are still in dire situation of looking for housing, especially in the informal settlement, which we find in urban areas? And what I think the discussion, there's a missing link in terms of the discussion as to where are we actually going to house these people. Obviously, we are having a lot of people coming to our cities in the urban areas, and we're doing the best we can. But do we have land to accommodate these people? As you can see, most of those houses we're talking about for 3.5 million. Some of them, they were actually found to be in the peripheral areas. And people, what they normally do with those kind of houses, what we find out is that some of them, they end up selling those houses and making sure that other people use those houses, and then they come to the cities, even if it means that they will be at the peripheral, even if it means that they won't be having services. Then it then means that, which means the houses that we've been providing people have just been houses and structures. People, they want more than that. People, they want housing, not houses as physical structures. And that has been the missing link that we have. And of course, the minister did talk about that they picked that as an issue, and they started addressing that. But the question is, where are we going to house these people now? Do we have land? I think if we don't resolve the issue around land, where we're going to put these people within urban areas, and I'm not just talking about land here for you, I'm talking about land which is strategically located, where the poor are able to access services within the urban environment. And I think that has been the missing link in most of the discussion that we have, to say, how do we bring the poor within the cities and make sure that we integrate them? And we know the rural development statistics will show in the report, and the audit report, which indicated that the majority of land belongs to the white communities. And of course, it's not surprising, therefore, to find the most Black African people to be the ones who are struggling in terms of the housing and in urban settings. So that would be my initial reactions.
Tapelo Mohapa, I can imagine, I mean, the 3.5 million houses delivered means nothing to you for as long as you live and many people live, you know, in shacks or simply have nowhere to live.
Good evening, Vuyo. Good evening to the viewers. Vuyo, I'm greeting else from the shack that I inherited from my parents, because in this government we inherit poverty. It's sad because I watched my parents going along those lines in 1994 to vote for a dispensation, a free, democratic South Africa, which was going to deliver services. But little do we know that we are voting for corruption. We are voting for people who wanted to enrich themselves and their families. In July, on the 14th, the community where I live was gutted by fire. We lost everything. This is a story of every person that lives in an informal settlement. When it rains, rain is said to be a blessing for many South Africans. But people who are living in shacks, it's a time for you to reflect and think where you're going to put your kids. Little did we know that more than 25 years into democracy, post-apartheid, that we are going to live under these lives. What we have not touched on, and I listened very carefully at the minister, unfortunately, she's new in this department. Tokyo came in and made the same promise. It was Lindy where the second time around, she made the same promises, and it has always been the same promises. We are living like pigs in the mud. This is our everyday lives, and it is very sad that people who are living in their very fancy housing. You look at the minister's background and you look at my background right now, you can see that poverty is there, and we are struggling, and we continue to struggle. There has been fire. We've lost people during fire in Cato Crest. We've lost people during floods in some of the informal settlements. There has been corruption with the allocation of housing in Durban. People speak about Konobia, the greenfield that is around Durban. Half of the people who are living there are not the beneficiary of those houses. The minister speaks about building houses where people are living, and we've been calling for this for years, that in-suit upgrading should be the way. And Vuyo, you are right when you are saying that the upgrading of informal settlements, the resolution to that is as a result of the government. And we are supporting the upgrading of informal settlement. Yes, of course, it's as a result of the failure of the ANC-led government to deliver housing to the people. But we are saying this is the only option so that services are incrementally provided to the people, so that we have access to sanitation, so that we have access to electricity as well.
So you have to settle for less.
On their way to the toilets. Yes, people are dying on their way to the toilet, and we understand that not everyone who lives in informal settlement needs to be a beneficiary of housing. There are those who can afford it. And we are saying that those who can afford it must be given access to land so that they can build their housing the way that they want to build it. And those that are actually needs to be beneficial, who are in need and desperate need, should also get benefits from the government.
Okay.
But we know that the issue of housing, Vuyo, will remain the same with this government, because there need to be a dependency syndrome that is created by government, so that people who are living in formal settlement become banks for votes. Politicians are going to go door to door to informal settlement, pretending that people who are living in informal settlement have never been existent, that poverty has never existed in this country. Okay. We are saying, Vuyo, as Abahlali baseMjondolo, a house should not be seen, and I agree with the professor. The house should not be seen as a structure. It should be seen as a skills transfer. People should be trained to actually be able to build their own housing. It should be a poverty alleviation process where people are actually able to feed their families. Okay. But this, Vuyo, in closing, I want to say this can only be done when you actually speak with the people, not about the people. Okay. The people should be of their own development. What has been wrong with this government and what has failed this government to do is actually engaging with the poorest of the poor. Because when you are poor in this country, you are regarded as someone who cannot think, someone who would be hired. You hire an architect from Umhlanga, Rocks and Bramley and Sentin, because those people are genius to think on behalf of the poor. We are saying that we should be the ones who are planning our own development. We should be the ones who are in the forefront of our development. And therefore, if you are not speaking to the people who are directly affected, who live in the informal settlement, who feel the pain of living in informal settlement on a daily basis, then you are not dealing with the issue, and you are continuously going to have this issue of housing that have not been provided in this country.
Okay, Mr. Sotashe, now, for anyone listening to Thapelo Mohapi, especially if one is a public representative, it should hurt, but not only that, but it should actually move people like you to actually do something about it. And of the four of us who are in this conversation here, you enjoy a proximity, to the offices and the people who matter. If the issue is, as you said, the devolution of functions to local government, municipalities that have no revenue base and therefore can't deliver on the promises made, if there's a planning mismatch, if transfers arrive late, whose job is it? Because, you sit in those forums that supposedly deal with these issues. Where is the stumbling block? Why are these obvious things not being, or problems being sorted?
No, definitely you are correct. Look, just to, I think Tapelo is raising very fundamental points. It takes me to the conference of the UN Habitat that we held in Malta. And I think some of the lobby groups that were coming from South Africa attended that. And then I think the latest one was held in Abu Dhabi, where the regional governments committed that the issue of local government has to be responded to. It means that local government must be empowered. There are 5 fundamental objects of local government. Hence, we are raising this point with national government that, look, if you look at the equitable share, local government is receiving less than 10%. And with all the challenges that local government is faced with, and with all the issues that I have raised in terms of revenue base and otherwise, it is very impossible for municipalities to respond to some of these issues. Therefore, the issue of cooperative governance has to come to the fore, meaning that not only by availing the human resource support, but also availing the financial support to local government and partner with the organization like the organizations that Tapelo is representing. And I agree with him. The advent of democracy in 1994, it meant that our own government cannot take decisions on behalf of people. Our government has to take decisions informed by what people are saying. And I think the response by the president in terms of introducing the DDM model is beginning to respond to that issue of coordination, of bringing a kind of having a kind of a uniform approach in delivering services to our communities.
Okay.
So it means that now these 3 spheres of government are not going to be passing each other without knowing what local government is planning, what provincial government is planning, what national government is planning. So the DDM model is beginning to really try and synergize all these plans. Thank you very much for it.
Okay. Now, Prof, you raised quite a number of questions. And if you don't mind, I'd like you to answer at least some of them, if you don't mind. The question of where are we going to house these people? What have other jurisdictions or countries that have done better than us done in that regard? So if it's not the peripheral areas, where then can we put? Where do we find the land? Which is a question that you posed.
Thank you very much, Vuyo. I think the issue of land is a bigger issue, and I think this is where we actually need to start putting our efforts on. We can come up with all the policies and like a housing settlement, and of course the Department of Human Settlement, they've come up with some incredible policies as to how to respond to some of these issues, which deals with different socioeconomic status of people within South Africa. And the issue remains that people, they are continuing to be in rural settings, or sorry, in informal settlement. And of course, like you said, the issue of land, it becomes a very important issue. So we need to start taking some drastic step towards making sure that we acquire land in a strategic position. And this should be the government mandate. There are a lot of land which are lying out there, which are very close to the cities, and nothing's happening to those land.
So land is available, but it's just not being, taken or bought, whatever the arrangements might be.
Yes, and most of the land which is available, of course, is in the hands of the private sectors. And there has to be some engagement with the private sector to say, how do we then get this land from these private sectors to make sure that we house the poor? If we cannot have that discussion and start releasing land in a strategic position, South Africans, they will continue to do what they know best, which is to vote with their feet and try to locate themselves where they think is the right space for them and closest to the city, regardless of the consequences, whether environmental factors or floodplain, whichever way we might say it. The South African, in fact, by locating themselves in the informal settlement, they're sending a very strong message to say, this is where we want to be, and you have to assist us to be where we want to be. Hence, the discussion now around the upgrade of informal settlement, to say we need, therefore, to upgrade informal settlement because they've already identified the space for themselves. The fact that we've got thousands and millions of people in the informal settlement and it's functioning is a pointer to planners themselves and, of course, to government officials to say, we need to be thinking along this direction. We need to get land which is strategically located. Giving people land which is strategically located is the only solution that we have. And that's the discussion we need to have. Not just having a discussion, but make sure that we lead that discussion towards the implementation. Okay,
political will. The quick last word from you, Thapelo. We have less than a minute left.
We are saying, Vuyo, that as a we are here to engage with government. Unfortunately, in Durban, we have been, activists have been targeted. We've lost many of them, 18 activists who uncovered corruption. And then I'm very, sad that those who are actually uncovering this corruption that is taking place with the allocation of housing are being targeted and killed in KZN. Houses here, Vuyo, are located on the bonnet of a car by ward councillors. Councillors are not supposed to be allocating housing, but here in KZN, in eThekwini in particular, that is happening. We don't have access to toilets. Refuse is not collected in the informal settlement until the dignity of the poorest of the poor is recognized in this country. And that we are not seen as bank for voters. Whenever politicians need vote, they go to informal settlements. I think we will be able to honestly deal with the issue of housing that is facing our country for years, so that we do not become inheritance of poverty from our parents who were oppressed by the apartheid system. And now we are oppressed by our own leaders whom we voted in 1994 with the hope that they were going to relieve us from what our parents went through.
Let's hope they are indeed listening. Special thanks to SALGA's chairperson for human settlements, Kolani Sotashe, Thapelo Mohapi, who is the national spokesperson of Abahlali Basemjondolo, and academic Professor Hope Makidimisha Chipungu, who has written extensively on the subjects. I so wish we only had more time, but that's where we have to leave it this evening. Do join us again tomorrow, same time, 8 p.m. sharp. Have a good night.